it's essentially a calculator that would tell you what change you would get if you gave them money. They might staple it together to that order for you. That's it. But that whole thing traveled through, 4 or 5 roles from the beginning of the visit.
Yeah,
that's a Saga.
So remember the thing. So the thing is a Saga, or the process that orchestrates changing that thing is a Saga.
Well, that's the whole thing. Maybe we can get into.
So,
does
the ticket itself is not the Saga? The ticket itself is the state. It's like represents the state, right. The thing I hold.
So who is moving this around? In this case, it's only the waiter or waitress, right?
Or the cook.
The cook doesn't really move it.
No, he takes it, and when he takes it off the plate, he puts it with the plate. Here it is.
But not really. He doesn't orchestrate anything between any other entities. He's given that by the waitress.
Yeah.
And he just moves it around. He doesn't even hand it back to the waitress. The waitress just picks it up whenever she comes by.
I've seen cooks clip it on the top. So they have some order or something. They take it off the pile and then they clip it on.
I think it's usually the waitress that puts it in the queue on the little clip thing.
So somebody from the front hands it to the back. When the back's done, they actually put it back in the queue for the front.
I think they put it under the plate. So there's they put it under the plate.
That's what I said. So they put it under the plate, whatever. So they do move the ticket. But the point is.
But they didn't really move it out of their domain. I mean, that's.
I guess you're talking about details about a Saga, and you're talking about this thing, the ticket, right? But I was thinking, what's a Saga? The ticket's a Saga? No.
I think it's one of the same. Yeah, well, okay, so I get your point.
You're really not explaining what a Saga is.
Yeah, I think it might be
a workflow. And that's what people get very confused.
Yeah, so is Saga the role of the waitress to move this thing around? Is that the definition of the Saga?
You don't know? Are you asking me or what?
I'm being dumb on purpose. I'm just talking.
I say, okay, here, Adam, you're asking me a question. I say, here's my question. I don't know what a Saga is. And you turn to me and you answer, well, is the Saga the thing you like? Well, I don't know. I don't know what's a Saga. What's this word you're using?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. And you're asking.
I wish it wasn't so confusing. I wish we just.
I like a drunken, angry discussion as much as the next man.
Somebody try. Right? I'm serious.
Yeah.
So the ticket is an entity, or the slip, or whatever we're calling it.
Yeah.
Right.
And to me, the Saga is the process, right?
Yeah.
So, because I asked you, say, what's the difference between a Saga and a workflow? Because I heard that some people say they're the same thing, some people say they're different things. And so, is it Saga just a fancy name for a workflow?
Yeah.
Some only call it Saga when it's about distributed systems.
Like what? And so, do you understand my question? Is like, are they one and the same? It's just a fancy name that we insist on using, and then why we're using it, or there's some distinction for us?
Yeah, I mean, workflow doesn't necessarily pertain to non-distributed systems. I mean, that's a little strange that you would call it Sagas if it's distributed, and workflow if it's a single CPU solution.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
I just wanted to say, for some, part of the definition is it's not in the same subsystem / bounded context, whatever you want to call it. For some, they say it has to be across some boundaries. Otherwise, it would not be called Saga, but just a mere whatever process or something.
If I say, so a Saga is kind of a workflow that crosses different business contexts. Like in the kitchen example, the front of the store versus the back, basically the context of how they operate in the front versus the kitchen. The kitchen's all about making meals, and the front's about ordering and serving customers. So it's a workflow that, if they're just doing the stuff in the front, a Saga is a workflow that crosses those contexts. Is that what we're saying a Saga is? I'm actually asking, or did I not quite get the essence?
No, I see a better way of showing this. I think
Thomas is confusing me on the chat.
No, it is.
A Saga is a series of fortunate. A saga is a series of fortunate events.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's good.
Unfortunate. It's a movie series of
Yes.
unfortunate events, or it's a TV show or a Netflix series. I haven't really
Yes.
liked it, but
Yes. I do like. I think there's an interesting thing. Does it have to cross boundaries? And I think with event modeling, I'm going to share my screen here again, because I think we can show the Saga actually existing in both definitions. I hope. So, oops. So here's a bunch of things that we need in terms of how they, I guess they get written to, some things happen along the way, and these may be robots, or they may be actual things that.
Jetson's Diner.
Yeah, exactly. So here's one that's within. So I would say that perhaps there is the case that a saga could be talked about within one bounded context or one subsystem, because there's a greater thing. There's a greater argument here. Do we have to split something as a separate subsystem, right? Do we have to split the storage of events as a separate subsystem? What's the definition of those things as well? So, if you look at this in one system, this is system A, and there is some, I guess, something that's tracking how far we've gotten along, this green thing here, right? We can call that our slip. But if we do, I guess, two systems, let's say one of these things happens in a second system, how different is this than this? And does this really mean, orchestration between three three-step workflow steps versus two subsystems? Does it make a difference?
Yeah, for the devs, it makes a difference because they want to know where to implement.
Well, it does, but is it that important that they should know, or are the contracts between, or is it enough to know what the state transitions are, and then it doesn't matter because they know that they either have to publish internally or just put it on the bus, right?
Depends on who you're asking.
Okay. Yeah.
For the people, maybe it's not of too much interest, but at least for the developers, they want to know, or that should be modeled somehow. Is it a complete separate thing? Like C or something, not A, not B, but C, or does it live? But this is, I would say, a problem.
That's the idea, and this is, this goes back to our other talk, which is interesting, because we were talking about, where does the slip live, right? Where we wanted to talk about this as being, our state for this whole thing, or do we actually have the whole thing done, like you said, with an orchestrator, which would be, the same thing, A, B, but C is our orchestrator, and in this case, that's where we would have the line of thinking from these things, right? So I should really be doing copy paste here, but whatever.
Yeah, you could argue.
You understand what I'm saying is that we have the same thing as A, B, and C for state. Sorry, A and B for state, but how far we got along in terms of how far we went along is still kind of in. Let me see here. Let's color this in.
You might argue it's
and then these guys live here, right? What's that?
Yeah, you might argue, okay, it's just an implementation detail. anyways.
Yeah.
I would say, well, then there's the language. Right? Typically, you have in a different subsystem, you also have a different language. So the same terms might mean different things, or vice versa. You have different things, but it means basically the same. It's just in a different subsystem's language.
Oh,
And
I agree. I mean, I think
that might also be a reason why you want to have a total like the C subsystem, because maybe the language doesn't fit to solve this subsystem boundary crossing workflow, because you need a dedicated language, and
sure.
neither language A nor language B is sufficient to solve this problem on a high level, right? Without technical details. Just think
so
it
let me
be
propose
deployed in a monolith.
Let me propose this as a solution then. Let me propose this as a solution. I'm making this a dotted line, meaning that these are just now swim lanes in, you know, to say that these things will live in the same microservice, but the terminology is going to be different. So logically, we have two systems, so we can talk about it. So B and C are deployed together, but logically they're separate, so that we can talk about the language in the routing slip that doesn't apply to a kitchen or the order or the food or the price and the invoicing, but is strictly within orchestration, maybe. Would that help?
It might, but I still see it as some kind of a technical detail.
Why would it be
Just
technical
always
at this point? Because you usually have these microservices sitting with a team, autonomous teams, right? So usually Conway's law would say it's easier to have them in charge of the same cluster, have them in charge of the same data storage facilities and deployment, you know, cycles and whatever else they come up with.
Yeah, but I always think it also must be applicable to a scenario where, let's say, you're still learning. On purpose, you do not want to deploy to more than one service, because you're still learning about the bounded contexts, and you on purpose you want to deploy in just one technical thing, like
Sure.
this.
So maybe
that monolith, and so it's not about scaling in this case. And let's say you're just a small team, you're starting out with a new idea, and you have just a few people. You have one team that owns all three subsystems that you mentioned. Then it's not about team scaling. It's not about
it's just about organization and language.
This performance scaling is just a technical thing. Then I guess what remains, this is kind of the essence that should be focused on.
So well, let's just keep that up as a shared thing, so we can discuss it a little bit more. But I think you're right. I think if we want to look at orchestrations as something we want to talk about and design with people collaboratively, you know, with our business, then whatever the deployment is shouldn't really matter, as long as we're getting our points across that, hey, this is how we handle our orders in our restaurant. And the way we can discuss the solution makes sense to have three separate swim lanes, because we want to use, you know, these types of these terms that stick well together for each area of concern. Is that a good way of saying it? Andreas?
Yeah.
But my other point here is this concept of reusing one read model where the line gets blurry, where I don't care if it's multiple streams or not. And if I look at how, you know, this part here keeps using the same you know, read model, I'll just call it X. Oops, that's not good. That's the same one. And it's involved in tracking multiple state transitions for the purpose of doing something like, you know, a to-do list would do. And it does the same thing even if we have this multi-step process in separate streams and separate subsystems all the way through until we even house this thing in its own separate swim lane, because like you said, Andreas, maybe the terms just don't fit in subsystems A or B. And so we don't want to pollute you know, what we have when we deal with, you know, those systems by this other thing. In other words, the cook doesn't care about the price of the food and things like that. So we want to keep it clean. And so we definitely don't want the kitchen to be the storage of the state of this, right? And it may very well be that in our diner, we don't want to have any of these individual subsystems to be burdened with this concept. And I think this is your point, Andreas.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
So that you're not polluting, you know, the cook doesn't have to like, oh, why do I have to care about, you know, this stupid piece of paper? I just see that I have to make eggs and ham and I'm finished. Let me do my job, right?
Maybe
So,
let's put it like that. So as long as you can solve this longer running business problem with one language, then you're free to deploy it in the same subsystem, but also in a separate that just uses the same language, like a conformist.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that with these organizations, you have.
Yeah, but let me just.
Sorry, go ahead.
Cross the point. But if neither of the languages are suitable to solve this longer running business problem, then you're kind of forced to put it in a new subsystem because it's a new language. But still, you can deploy all of that together in one monolith, or you might deploy it into separate microservices. I mean, this is totally agnostic of these deployment details.
Well, okay.
You know what
try and phrase it one more time for me, because I'm not sure I understand 100%.
Yeah, so if either the read models that you were talking about now, or we're talking about this quote-unquote Saga or a longer running business problem to solve or longer running business process, if you can solve this Saga problem with a language of either A or B, then you are free to choose if you want to deploy it along with A or B, or if you want to deploy it to C, or let's say technically, in the case of a monolith, I mean, it would be deployed to the same technical thing, but still you'd be free. As soon as you would deploy to individual microservices, you could deploy it either way. But if the language forces you to use this new subsystem C, then you cannot choose to deploy it in A or B. You have logically, it has to be its own and cannot be put along with either A or B.
I don't know about that. Just because of the terminology that you use, it shouldn't be deployed with something else. I think you should be free to do that, but understand.
Deployment already. Maybe just right now, I realize maybe it involves too much technical details for my taste. Maybe stay on the level of just modeling. Can you express the solution to this longer running business problem?
Yeah, I totally agree with that part.
With the language.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, you don't want to confuse things unnecessarily. So if putting the order slip details into a swim lane that talks about cooking is going to make the cooks, the team that's looking after the cooking, more difficult and unnecessarily complex, then yeah, don't put it in there. You know, it may be something to do, you know, it may be not such a great problem to put it in with the person that's taking the cash in the payment system. Maybe that actually is a level of complexity we're happy to deal with, so that we can deploy it with the payment subsystem for this purpose. But again, that depends on what you're talking about. Is it confusing? Is it helpful, or is it neutral? Right? On various shades in between as to, you know, what that means. And it obviously would be, you know, highly dependent on the types of teams you're working with, whether you've gotten a certain amount of automation that this burden to one particular team wouldn't be too much, and say, yeah, sure, that thing can live here. If there's changes in here, we'll gladly, you know, roll them out as part of the releases we do, or even do that as part of our scope. But yeah. So does it help? Does it hinder, or does it do neither?
Yeah. Maybe you should also take into account the kind of the cohesion to subsystem A or B. So if you would say, okay, we have a anti-corruption layer, and we're compensating for the different language in A, because we have, let's say, double the amount of events in A, and we can solve the problem with the language of A, and we just kind of translate this one event to our language, then maybe there's a stronger cohesion in A to solve this problem in A.
Yeah.
Okay. So
no, absolutely.
Can I say something?
Of course.
Can we actually speak in terms of this example, as in let's not say A, B, and C. Let's say cook and waiter and whatever,
Sure,
because
yeah.
I think it's more understandable that way to
I
follow
agree.
as well.
Interesting what we'll have to come up with. So I guess if I was doing this badly at
Maybe
first, I would say
have
cafe, right, in the first one, and then maybe in the second one I would say cook and waitress, and then let's rev these out here. Oops. So what would the names be down here? I guess they would be, I guess the waitress might go around here and we'd split them up. Why did I change my pen? That's not good. I think I did maybe I did a stamp thing. Undo. Okay. So yeah, what would that be?
Are these three different systems that we're trying to emulate?
Well, it would be, but one of them's kind of made up, right? So I think we still have, oops, I think we still have a cook.
We're gonna have a cashier, I guess.
Yeah, cook, maybe cashier, and then waitress is doing the actual moving things around. So we kind of evolve the system like this as we build things up, right?
So it's interesting you're naming the swim lanes by actors.
Well, they're roles, I know.
So
I know you'd call me out on that, but whatever.
I'm just asking you a question. Is really you're saying this is the kitchen context? In the kitchen, all we care about is taking order, cooking order. I have an army of people, you know, and in the cashier, that's kind of more the waitress is kind of the is more the, I don't know, front of the restaurant, right?
Yeah.
Cashier is kind of the.
I'm going to rename them because I think that's a good point, Rick.
Yeah, I know what you meant, but as soon as you
no.
then it kind of like
that's just me rushing.
Context, right?
Yeah.
Right.
No,
and
it's important.
Put that into the context of the what do they call it? I know the kitchen is easy. What do they call the front area?
Hostess.
The serving area, right?
Kitchen. I don't know. What do they call it?
Yeah,
serving. So I'm serving food, right? So I'm
yeah.
serving. So there's kitchen, there's the serving, and then
Keep
there's
that brush.
Yeah, Adam, because I'm pretty sure we're pretty soon also using names for events and the like. Why not switch to ONode now for this more concrete example?
Yeah, we can. Sure. Let me just finish this scribble so that we have it done. So we have kitchen. We have, what's the second one we had? Cashier, right?
yeah, cash.
Or cash, yeah, right.
Or just put cash. It's good enough. It's the payment.
Payment, yeah. Cash.
Accounts receivable.
Yeah, AR. Yeah.
And then there's serving.
Serving, exactly.
Serving
Okay,
and
so the
ordering.
last one we have is serving.
Right.
That makes
Serving's
sense.
good enough. Service, or maybe service, right? They're the front service.
No, a server is serving. I think that's a
good enough.
a tough one. Again, stupid names. Manager, store manager. Wait, let's make a manager
They kind of call it the
class.
service area, right? Where they do all the service. They bring you water, they clean your dishes. That serving the customer.
Well, some cafes don't have room for that even, right? They're just like cafes. They're literally tables you sit at. There is no room for an area.
It's called microservice.
The only real area is maybe by the till, where you
Right.
can
but
put
it's the
money
context
on, and
of-
the
context
counter.
of the context of getting the customer's order, handing them the food, picking up their dishes, right? And
Yeah.
then when they're done eating, then there's the transaction context of, hey, pay, right?
Yeah.
Cash. So serving is good enough. But yeah, so are we switching to ONode?
Yeah, I'm gonna
Okay.
pop that on right
Maybe
now.
while we switch to ONode, I just looked at some links and I pasted them in the chat, right?
The sagas and all that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's really kind of confusing, but I think,
Yeah.
so the question is, what are we going to talk about? The interesting thing here is Saga comes down to, what it is in relation to workflow, and then what it is in relation to CQRS. And that,
Yeah.
right?
Well, one of
I
the things
picked up
that
I'll just read these statements and you
Yeah.
can then tell me that's not quite right or that makes sense to me, right?
yeah.
And so this one, and I'm just reading the quotes from the links, right? So a Saga is a larger transaction that is split up to a set of smaller transactions. So that's one aspect of what a Saga is,
Yep.
right? A workflow, also known as a business process, is similar in the sense that it also defines a larger task as a set of individual activities, right? So it's similar,
hmm
but Saga, and here's the key thing is, Saga has a different meaning in the context of CQRS. I don't know if that's true or not.
I don't know.
Here, Sven. In CQRS, Saga refers to workflows or process managers from the implementation perspective. So it's really, Saga is about the implementation.
Yeah, I think that's a fringe thing. I
And
would.
that might be a fringe thing, right?
Yeah.
And then there was somebody in the CQRS thing, and they defined it as, what is a Saga? And this is maybe another fringe thing. A Saga is an independent component that reacts to domain events in cross-aggregate, eventually consistent manner, right?
Yeah.
Sagas are sometimes purely reactive and sometimes represent workflows.
Yeah. I think.
The other state, and I'm just going to read it. From an implementation perspective, a Saga is a state machine that is driven forward by incoming events, which may come from many aggregates, right? Some states will have side effects, such as sending commands and talking to external service or sending emails. And right. So, so basically, someone asked the question, isn't a Saga leaking domain logic? Sagas are doing things that no individual aggregate can sensibly do. That's the CQRS domain-driven design view of the world, right?
Yeah.
So basically, it's logic that doesn't belong in an aggregate. Now, I don't know if those are true or not true, but I just kind of pasted those in order and gave the links to the pages.
Yeah, I'm
That's
kind of
also true of
I did a quick Google because I just wanted somebody's words and say, now what are our words, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to use them because, as you can see, there's so many opinions
Right.
in there.
There's this level of abstraction, which you're talking about a Saga, which a Saga is a business process or a workflow. And then at the implementation detail, you talked about Sagas, really represented by this state, this ticket, And that's getting to the implementation side of it. There has to be a state and a thing that holds the state,
Yeah.
right? And that's an implementation view. Like if you want a long-running work process, there has to be something that holds the state. Is does that belong in an aggregate, or does that belong outside of any individual?
No, I think that's the big thing that people get hung up on, and that's the implementation side, meaning that, oh, now I need to have an aggregate to make this thing behave a certain way and have its own state. We've relaxed that rule to be just a read model, because read models can still be treated as state machines, right? And you can circumvent the need of having a specific thought about something domain-driven, design specific, for being able to implement it. So if we have just a read model, something that just listens to events, you can have processors that react. You know, they might pull that read model once every second and do something that ends up producing an event that effectively changes the state of that read model.